welcome to this idea talks, which is kind of different because this idea day that we hold is normally something that we have as something in person, right? An idea day is a day to share ideas where people gather around round tables and share ideas about life and ministry and leadership. But today we're doing one that's kind of an online format. And I'm joined today by my friends Cody Kuehl up in Michigan and Robby Greene down in Texas. And we're discussing church revitalization and why things seem to be trending that direction, why so many guys are going to be going into a church revitalization project rather than necessarily a church plant. And we're going to be talking about that over these next few minutes. We'd love for you to join the conversation by commenting. If you're watching this on Facebook a little bit later, join the conversation, comment, and let us know. Or you can email us, and we'll give our emails later. Connect with us in that way. So first of all, let me introduce my friends here, and then have them kind of tell you a little bit about themselves. Cody Kuehl, Robby Greene. Let's begin there with Robby. Robby, tell us a little bit about yourself, your ministry experience, how you found yourself at the church you're at, and what your position is there at the church.
Well, I started out as an intern, started just a few days after I graduated college and was supposed to be there for a year. And now here 20 plus years later, 21 years later, I'm the senior pastor. And so I've done a little bit of everything in the church, with a lot of years children's pastor, and then spent a couple of years as executive pastor before becoming the top guy that everybody
so Lavond Drive. Lavond Drive is a ministry that is a well-known ministry in the Independent Baptist movement. Was at one point one of the 10 fastest growing churches in America by Elmer Townsend's book, one of his famous books. And Lavond Drive has gone through incredible growth, and it's gone back and forth. And now you being the pastor, kind of leading it as well. I would love to talk a little bit more about, we're going to get into that, the story there, how God has led you to be the pastor, and what it's taken to begin bringing revitalization to Lavond Drive Baptist Church. I'm looking forward to that conversation. And then Cody Kuehl. Cody Kuehl is my friend up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we worked together here in Las Vegas for about 5 years. And then God called you and Shonda to go up to Grand Rapids and kind of replant and revitalize the church there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. We left the greatest church on the west side of the Mississippi.
Oh, that's so
I don't know if you
untrue.
know what church that is, Josh, but I think Southern Hills Baptist. Amazing place.
Oh, that's really very nice.
To the greatest church this side of the Mississippi, Grand Rapids Baptist, which it didn't used to be called Grand Rapids. It used to be called Breton Road Baptist, not normally the name that I would call it, but it was on Breton Road. It was a church that was on Lifeline. And my wife and I knew that God wanted us to be here. And so we've been here 7 years, raising the dead, as they say, and revitalizing this church. It's been a phenomenal ride. So we came into the church with about 20 people. So
yeah, it's been about 20 people, and it's grown to, at this point, for sake of context,
we're at 350, like on average.
Yeah. So it's an incredible story what's happened in both locations. We're going to talk more about that. But you said something that is interesting to me, raising the dead. So my mother is a pastor's wife. She's a church planter. Cody, you know her very well. And she always says what she is thinking. And my mother said, growing up, I heard it many times, she said, it's so much easier to give birth than raise the dead.
Yeah.
And what she meant by that is, Josh, if you're going to pastor, plant a church, don't take a dead church. And so in my mind, it was always plant a church. And I love church planting. I want to plant churches. We're planting more churches through our church and Idea Day. But it seems to be that the trend is going to be much revitalization and replants like what you both are doing because of what's happening. They say that the trends are, through those who do the research, they say the trends are so many churches that at one point were running 200 people, 300 people, some 3,000 people have all declined. The 3,000 churches down to 250, the 300 churches down to 25. And now all of these elder pastors, late baby boomers, if you will, are starting to retire and turning over the reins to young Gen Xers and millennials and saying, okay, you take these churches And now a lot of these guys, instead of going out and planting churches, are going to be doing revitalization projects. Do you hear the same type of thing?
I hear the same type of thing for sure. I mean, there's churches closing by the week in our area. I mean, there's empty church buildings everywhere that need to be revitalized, people who are looking for a pastor to lead them. I think it is easier to plant a church in that fact that you get to create culture and create structure. But church revitalization is more like an emergency room situation where you have to figure out, why is this church dying? You have to diagnose it, then do some open heart surgery and experience a lot of healing and transformation in their life, because they're stuck in a certain way of thinking. And so coming into that context, you're kind of helping people change minds and fix their problem. So that's why it's dying. There's a reason why it's dying. It's obviously God's will for them to grow, for them to thrive, for them to reach people for Christ. But why aren't they? Why is it dying? Why are the doors about to close? And so diagnosing that is important, and then helping them see the importance of where we need to go. And I have a lot of things to say about that, but yeah, it is hard. It is hard to go into a situation where people are stuck in a tradition system. People are living in these ministry silos where everybody has their own agenda, where they want to go with the ministry, and then coming in and rallying all the troops around one vision, or core values is what I would call them. And because I'll tell you, there's so many people with different core values, and then rallying them around the ones that are biblical is so important.
Well, Robby, you're in a situation where the church is not necessarily dying. It's had a thriving history, but it was on the decline. And you had to come in and do exactly what Cody is saying, identify what are the problems that are leading to decline, and how do we solve those? But how do you do that while remaining pastoral? How do you do that while remaining loving toward the flock?
Well, I think that's one of the areas that God just really allowed me the opportunity. If I had not been there for 17 years before I became the pastor, it would have been much, much more difficult to pull this off. I had the love and the respect of the people, and that helped a lot. The problem in our situation is we had declined gradually for years. We had just been on, and so it was almost unnoticeable. When you only lose 30 people in a year, you don't really notice that, especially when there's still over 1,000 coming. And so it was easy just for our church people to live in the past, because we were the big church that was talked about all across the country, and our people were still living on that 30 years later. And so for us, I think the identifying several things, as Cody just mentioned, was critical. And one of the big areas, and Josh, you've been there, one of the areas was our facilities. It looked like a place that God worked 30 years ago. It didn't look like a place that God was there today.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. Tell a little bit about that story so people have context. So the church at one point had grown to what size? And then it had slowly, like you said, lost 30 people, 50 people a year, 100 people a year, and it slowly declined over what span to what it had become?
So we've been all over the map in our growth through the years, and part of that was because of some philosophical changes we made, which were good changes that needed to be made in music and other things through the years. And so our attendance had gone up, and then it had gone down. But our peak, we were running over 1,800 a week, and it had slowly declined. That we were down to about 1,200 probably a week, and so certainly. Like a relevant ministry in most people's eyes, but the problem is we're still declining. And
the problem was you saw the trend, and the trend was not growth, the trend was decline. And so it's like, okay, what do we do now? So you're talking quite a bit about the facility and how you had to transition that facility. And some of the people that are watching this, I know within the network of even Idea Day, there are those that are right now on the precipice of taking a church of 500, 600, 1,000 people, and that church has seen better days. What are some of the things that they need to focus on?
Well, I think you look for the wins, the easy wins. Tom Rainer calls it the low-hanging fruit. And you look for those things that you can go in and fix immediately that cause instant morale, that don't take a lot of money. We had adequate reserves when I became pastor, but we did not have anything extra in the budget. And so we had to get creative. And so, you know, we did as many things as possible that were easy, quick wins that would give us some morale. But then in our situation, finally, it took several years of leading and several years of putting a plan together to get our church to the place where we could go into a multi-million-dollar renovation and revitalization project. But I think the thing that I would emphasize it's easy when you're a church planner. Anything that is increase is automatic victory, because if you go from 4 to 8 in attendance, you've doubled. And church revitalization is so different than that. And I know my story. You know, we lost several hundred people when I became pastor. So here we went from 1,200 to 1,000 just almost immediately. Yeah. And
that's got to feel fantastic.
Oh, it's great. You wake up in the morning and realize you didn't make budget, and you haven't got anybody that walked the aisle for salvation or went through a membership class or whatever however you do it. And then you didn't make budget, and then the attendance is down 50, and you've got 5 families leaving this week. It's wonderful.
You know, let me ask you a question. Do you think that is likely to scenario for a larger church? Do you think that's likely for a scenario of somebody? Here's what my analysis of what both of you are telling me. It almost seems like when you go to Bretton Road Baptist Church was at the point where, like, look, we're dying. I mean, like, whatever you can do to help us, we're going to do. And it seemed like they seemed to be behind you a little bit. Let's talk more about that in a moment, maybe. But at Lavond Drive, it was almost like, if you're going to make shifts, look, we're still okay. We may be on the decline, but we're fine. And you're going to come in and try to change all this. Do you think there should be an expectation, if you go into a larger church to bring revitalization, that there's going to be a group of people that leave?
I think you have to expect a group of people to leave. And then I think, just being honest, one of the hardest things is loving people that you know are not going to take the trip with you, but won't leave for 6 months or a year and a half still.
Wow.
And
okay.
That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So pastoring people through it, even though you know that they may be on their way out.
Exactly.
Cody, I don't know if you can see this, Robby, but it looks like your visual is a little out.
I'm getting a call if you're on the other end, and so.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. You're fine.
It should be. Here we go. Okay, sorry about that.
There it is. No, you're fine. So, Cody, let me take that over to you. What would you say whenever you got to Michigan and, okay, there's 30 people. You said 20-some people, right? Something like that.
20 people, yep.
20 people. You show up, and how do you begin? I mean, where do you start? What do you do?
Well, they start with, blessed are they that see beautiful things in humble places where people see nothing else. You know, God, I believe, was going to do something with a small group of people, because most of them had a heart to do anything it took to reach people for Christ. And there were some people that weren't excited about it, and there was reasons why the church was almost dead. And so those had to be addressed immediately. But one of the things that we had going for us that I think a lot of larger churches can kind of get caught in the weeds of this is that we had something that everybody's looking for. And that was when they walk through the door of any church, they're wondering, do you care about me? Do you love me? And in the smaller context of church, that can happen a lot more organically. It's like, hey, we know you're a visitor. We know you're here. We love you. And we bring you into our flock. And so we're offering something that a larger church kind of gets lost in a little bit through programs and systems and aesthetics and building programs. It's like, wow, these are great things that are happening, but do you even care about me? So in a smaller church, in our revitalization project, we have that one thing that helped us grow. And that's obviously something we don't want to lose where we're at right now. But I will tell you, it was a beautiful thing, to help them, change some of their ways. For example, some of these people got saved maybe behind a wood pulpit, and they got saved in, when a certain style of music was playing, and they thought that's what saved them. And just reminding them, no, it was Jesus that saved you. It wasn't those things. And then rallying them around some core values have helped our church elevate the mission and downplay the preferences. And once we got that established, we just hit the ground running, and everybody that came in felt loved, and we're on mission, and we're not deviating from that. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Downplaying preferences and elevating mission. That's not an easy transition to make, right? Especially if preferences have become what dominate the conversation. Robby, have you experienced that?
Oh yeah. And I think one of the things that, no doubt, Cody, I can see exactly what you're talking about in a smaller setting. Like they realized they had to do something. Our people didn't even realize that we were sick. They didn't even realize anything's wrong. So I start talking about anything and changing something. And my predecessor, wonderful man, we're very, very close. He's still in the church, but he was here 50 years. And so he was like Moses. And I told the church the first week, I said, I'm not Joshua. And so I'm going to have to lead in my own shoes and be who I am. That was tough. For us, that was, I would say, easily 2 long years of just really proving why we were in the shape that we were in without trying to destroy somebody else's legacy, without trying to offend unnecessarily. Sometimes you offend because you just have to speak the truth, but also realizing that there were hundreds of people here that have built this place and sacrificed to give us what we have. And I've got to look at them in the face and say, things have got to change.
And that's not always easy, to be able to show reverence and deference and love to the previous generation and all that was accomplished, but also say the past is amazing, but the future is where we're going. That's not an easy thing to do, right?
Well, that is definitely not. And I think that's where, boy, for someone that is thinking of doing it, I mean, you got to be willing to have a lot of face-to-face meetings and a lot of breakfasts and a lot of lunches and a lot of dinners, a lot of key players. And you've got to, I know in my situation, the format was nearly always the same. Let's spend a lot of time in this conversation talking about how wonderful the past is, honoring the past, respecting the past, and then find some common ground. One great thing about our church has always loved reaching people with the gospel. And so whether you're 80 years old or whether you're 30 years old, the passion is just as equal. And so starting to cast a vision about, wouldn't you love to see the baptistry having people in it again? Adults, not just kids, but adults that are getting baptized and lives being changed. And for our people, that's when we started turning the corner. They started realizing, hey, the gospel doesn't change. Times change, but the gospel doesn't change. And so for us, it's been a long process, but it's been so worth it. It's something that I just want to make sure that, not knocking church planning, because it is important, and we support a number of church plants. But we have all the facilities. We had everything. We had healthy bank accounts, reserves. We had facilities that needed repair and updating, but they were paid for. There was no debt. And so, versus a church planner that's got to go raise a bunch of support, really, here I've got a staff. I've got a lot of advantages over a church planner. And not knocking church planning, but I think that's where revitalization is going to become much more popular in our churches, because we can't raise enough money to plan enough churches, especially when we've got facilities sitting here that are paid for, that are just waiting for somebody to come in and take.
Amen.
And almost necessarily so. I mean, popular, yes, but necessarily so. There are, if we're going to use terms as the world would, resources, billions upon billions of dollars of resources that are going to be left on the table if we do not go in and revitalize these churches. Why is that important to somebody like me? Here's why. Because here I am, I'm a church planter, right? After 14 years, right? Or after 12 years, we've been in this building for 2 years. After 12 years, we work like dogs for 12 years. And our church is not the greatest church ever, but things went well, some would say, for 12 years. And as good as they went, finally, we were able to get into a building. And finally, I have $3 million in debt. That's the best case scenario.
Hey, I'm going
like
five is the
five. You're going to, that's right, exactly. So what a lot of guys may not realize from the outset, they may be like, oh man, church planting, that'd be the only option. And if you're called to church planting, you should. And Idea Day is all about a church planting. In fact, we've got a church planting luncheon this year at Idea Day where we're going to present 10 church planters that are planting all over the U.S. It's awesome. And we're going to raise thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for them. So I love church planting. I'm a church planter. We support church planters, as you said. But it could be that guys that are watching this have this opportunity to take this church in the middle of Minnesota, or take this church in the middle of Colorado, or take this church in Georgia, and there's only 25 people. And that doesn't seem like anything great. But the reality is they're coming with millions of dollars of resources. They're coming with a core group of people who are in love with Jesus. And they're coming with about 5 to 10 really big problems they have to solve. Now, with the church plant, the only problem you have to solve is I got to find money and a place to meet. I got to feed my children. But at least in this scenario, there's a little bit of a core group. You are years and years ahead because you have a building, and you have to have some uncomfortable conversations with a few deacons. But it seems like a great option. Cody, speak to this. Am I simplifying it too much?
No, you're not. No, I mean, to revitalize just means to live normal again. They're unhealthy.
Oh, that's awesome.
And because there's so many of these churches, Josh, that are closing, there's 20 people hanging on for dear life and they don't know why it's dying. They need a pastor to come in like a Timothy to set in order the things that are wanting. We planted a church, man, that went great, but I'm helping a guy plant another church. We just found a building. That's like 5 years of work done in 1 month. And, when you're meeting in a school and you're a tear down church, that gets exhausting over time. And I'm not saying, in some places you're the only church in town, you have to do that. But man, if you can get a building, you can have 20 people, and let's say 10 of them are totally behind you. I read a statistic that no matter what you do, 10% of them will just say no. 70% will say, I don't know, and 20% will say, I'm all in, I'm with you. So instead of spending all of our time on trying to convince the ones that say no, let's try to win the ones that say, I don't know, and rally around the ones that are totally all in with you, because you're going to win that way.
So, boy, what Cody said is so true. We focus as leaders on that 10% that if Jesus himself came and pastored the church, they would be against it. They don't even know why they're against it. And you're never going to take them with you, and you may as well forget taking them with you, and focus on that 70%, because I found in our situation, there were hundreds that just were waiting for somebody to take this thing and say, here's where we're going. When you're giving birth to something, you get to set all the traditions, you get to set all the history for the church, because you are the history. And I think that's why a lot of guys shy away from church revitalization. I think, first of all, they've heard horror stories, which in the end are really not near as bad as what really people make them out to be. Yes, you're going to deal with conflict, but if you're a church planner and grow something to a couple of hundred people, you're going to deal with conflict in that church as well.
Yeah.
So you may as well, as a leader, get used to conflict and just understand it's going to happen wherever you go. And then I think the other reason our generation maybe shies away from church revitalization is in church planning. If you are strategic enough and work hard enough, most of the time you can get some immediate traction. But then what they don't understand, I think, is you get that initial traction that comes with church planning. But then there's a period from year 2 to year 10, maybe, that you, like you said, Josh, you work your heads off to get to where you are. And in church revitalization, it's a slow, long process as well, but it's more on the front end. And so you don't get the honeymoon, maybe, that you would get.
That's a good thought, yeah.
But you're coming in and you just know, okay, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, I'm going to be in a place that not only will be 1,000 times better than where we are today, but financially, I'm still going to be healthy enough to pay my staff, to pay my salary, to pay what needs to be done to move forward, even if it didn't go the way you thought it would go.
You know, it's interesting you say that about how many years it takes, not the initial, like, hey, everything's going well. I was just listening to Thom speak about this, and he said specifically, it's year 5 when you really start pastoring that church. If you're in a revitalization project, it's going to take years before you get to the point where you can literally pastor them. And then he always walks it back. I've heard him say this before. He says, doesn't mean you're not doing ministry. You are ministering. But when you're in that 5th year, suddenly things begin to click. You're pastoring in that way. You're leading them like never before. But it takes years to get to that growth and that ability. Would you agree with that?
I'm in year 5, and that could not be more true. You
both mentioned the importance of like these personal conversations, this early time of personally getting interaction, face-to-face time with people. I always tell church planters that church planting is difficult. Don't get me wrong, but really it's simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. What I mean by that is it's simple in that all you have to do to build a church to 100 people is make 100 best friends. That's it. And then leverage that friendship to get them to show up on Sunday. So you're going to coffee with them, you're going golfing with them, you're going shooting with them. Even if you don't like guns, you go shooting with them. You do whatever they do. You're making best friends, and then you're like, see you Sunday. And that sounds strange, but in reality, what people want is a relationship. They want to be friends. They want to be loved. And as a pastor, there's something already inside of you that God has put you there. The more you spend time with them, you do fall in love with them. And you're spending time with them, you love their story, and you begin to see them the way Jesus sees them. And all that time for them is good because they fall in love with you. And all that time for you is good for them, good for you because you fall in love with them. And building to that 100 people, but it's all that one-on-one personal time. It seems like you talk about that when it comes to making changes and growth.
Yeah. Are you talking to me, Josh?
Yeah, Cody, and then Robby.
Yeah. Let me just, okay. So yeah. I think a lot of guys get this idea that I'm going to go into this place and we're going to put these systems in order. We're going to start assimilation. We're going to do all this. And people are like, wait, do you love me? So I heard somebody say that culture eats or your structure for lunch. So like you can have a healthy structure in church, but if everybody hates each other or people are mad or they're like in love with the past, that culture is going to eat all your structures up. It's never going to work. That's why in a church revitalization context, you have to focus solely on your culture. Is your culture healthy? Then establish your structures and your systems to grow. And I'm telling you, when we got there, our culture was very, very unhealthy. And the way to get a healthy culture is to set some convictions. And so we started with some convictions that we elevate the word of God. We're going to evangelize the world. We're going to equip the saints, and we're going to enjoy Jesus. And if everything else doesn't fall under those core values, then
that's awesome.
Then we're just going to cut those things. And you know what? It started to heal the culture. The body started to heal. And then we started all these systems and programs and whatever else you want to do that we think grows church. But really what grows church is just a healthy culture. We've grown with a healthy culture and very shallow systems. Now we're implementing very strong systems because we have a healthy culture. So that's kind of what I would say to that.
Okay, so you mentioned this idea that one of the inherent things that's going to take place is you're going to have to say goodbye to people. So along with the revitalization project, I'm assuming you're going to have right along with that rejection and criticism. How do you emotionally deal with that personally? I'm not saying, painting a better scene at the church. You go home and you've been criticized. You've been emotionally attacked. You've been hurt, and maybe people are leaving, maybe people are sticking around. But either way, how do you deal with that rejection and that criticism in a revitalization project, Robby?
I went home and cried.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, there were a number of times that, I think here's something that really needs to be said, and I know I haven't arrived, and there's so many shortcomings in my own life, but I think sometimes guys look at church revitalization people like us that have been there for a number of years, and they think that we like walk on water or something, that we don't have these emotions, and that we never have problems, and that that we're fearless leaders, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, I don't know a single church revitalizer that hasn't faced those difficulties with people, and just difficult people. Every surgery is messy. It's not fun. It's two things that give me a little comfort in that is that Jesus was betrayed. The devil is the father of lies, and he's the accuser of the brethren. Think about that. Every time you show up to church, Josh, somebody's accusing you of something. And they accuse us in little things, like, he didn't, I just don't think he preached the Bible right. Or, they accuse you of your motives and why you're wearing what you're wearing, why you don't wear a tie, and that sort of thing. There's just so many accusations that are made on a daily, like every day, they're making accusations of us to their spouse, to their friends, and that sort of thing.
Okay, so somebody who may be in a position, I'd like you to address the questions differently, really, because of where your position is. Cody, there's going to be somebody watching this that is ready right now, and they just candidated at this church, and it's got 20 people, and thinking to themselves, I just don't know. It looks like a big mess. Or there's somebody right now that's about to go into a church that has an incredible heritage, and there's 400 people left out of 2,000, or there's 1,000 people left out of 3,000. And it's like, that's a big thing, but both of them are revitalization projects. What would you say directly to them? Cody, why don't you begin?
All right. I would say to them, look, you don't need to preach better messages. You don't need to know it all. You don't need to be perfect in any way. You're already enough. You don't need to do it to impress God. You don't need to do it to impress them, because you are enough where you're at. God's going to equip the called. He's going to help you through those things. So you're doing it not to impress God or to impress people. You're doing it because you just want to. You want to love them. And the second thing I would say to them is come in with the greatest of all the virtues. There abideth faith, hope, and charity, and the greatest of these is charity. Have a charitable mind, no matter what context or kind of church you're going into to revitalize. If you go in with love, it's going to work out. Yeah, it's going to get messy, and there's going to be tears, and there's going to be broken relationships, and there's going to be a turning of systems and minds and culture. But if you go in it with love, a love for God and love for them, I think that's vitally important. And then one last thing, if you don't mind, is that I wouldn't budge on three things. I wouldn't budge on your relationship with the Lord, your family. Okay. I wouldn't budge on those. And then your health. I would work out. I would make that a priority. Don't neglect those things, because that's going to keep you going as you're revitalizing.
That's good.
Awesome. Robby?
Boy, and I'm having to lose weight right now because I didn't follow that my first couple of years as lead pastor, and I packed it on. So that is so true. But I would say a couple of things that for the guy that is getting ready to step out into this, so you don't know where you're going, you don't know what you're going to do, but begin to work on what you do know that you can do. So start preparing messages every week. Make time. You're going to have to make time. You think as a church revitalization person, you're going to have all this extra time. You're going to work your tail end off. So begin getting messages pulled together now. You can work on series. Boy, it'd be a wonderful thing if you had the first 12 weeks already ready to go, that you don't have to spend developing from scratch when you're first there on the ground. And then something that a wise mentor taught me, because this is what every church revitalization pastor is going to deal with. They get to that first meeting, and they're going to be asked this question: Pastor, what's it going to take to turn this church around? Or you're going to hear all the history of how wonderful it is. And I'm so thankful a mentor shared this with me, because my first inclination would be to lay out my chart and the 6 things that we're going to do and how it's going to be awesome, and, you know, become the politician, if you will, without even meaning to become the politician. And I think one of the things that my mentor taught me was, number one, asking them the question, you know, making this statement: I just got here. I'm still learning the place. What do you see as the possibility? Wow. What do you see as the greatest needs? Because you can sidestep a lot of landmines just by letting them talk rather than talking yourself. And then I think coming alongside with them, hey, would you join me weekly in a time of prayer? I can remember one person specifically that I really thought was not going to make it. And we began to pray together. And it was every other week. And we met together, and it wasn't a lot of fellowship. We got together and we really just got down to business. But for about 25, 30 minutes, we would pray. It was amazing how God began to knit our hearts together. And we have a tendency to, you know, God's called us to do a spiritual work. And I think one of the dangers in church planting and in church revitalization is we bring a secular mentality to it. And if we're not careful, we leave the Lord out. And at the end of the day, we can do all the systems just right and do everything, make the perfect steps. But if the Lord's not in this, and if we're not where we need to be spiritually, and if we are not leading others to become more like Christ, to become more mature disciples of Christ, then ultimately it doesn't matter how big the church grows, we failed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. See, that in and of itself, I think, was worth the price of admission today. So thank you, Robby, for sharing that. Yeah, so Idea Day is coming up. Okay, so both of you guys, I'm going to be seeing out here in January. You're going to be here for Idea Day. If for those who are watching right now, give them your best reason. Say, look, if you've never been to an Idea Day, come to Vegas. It's going to be fantastic. January 28th, 29th, we've got that Church Planners Luncheon. Then we've got the keynote evening service with Tom Rainer on Monday. Then you've got an all-day Idea Day. Fascinating. It's going to be the biggest one ever. Give us some reasons why people ought to come. Cody, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, one of the best reasons to go is because Josh Teis is there.
Hey!
I think that's a great reason to go.
That's a good friend.
You know, here's the deal. Like, we need each other. We need to be more interdependent and not so independent or dependent on others or codependent. We need to be interdependent. You can't have that without, you know, that fellowship and building relationships. You know, I'm so thankful for the people who have helped me in my ministry and coached me through a lot of this stuff. So you're going to find friendships and practical tools for ministry. When I went, it was absolutely phenomenal. It was great. And I recommend it to any pastor to go for those reasons.
You know, it's funny that you mention friendships, because it's true. People come for ideas for Idea Day, but they stay for the friendships that they make, because the relationships, I think, are the strongest thing that keeps a pastor where they're at. Not necessarily a new idea.
I agree.
Though we've got a lot of ideas, it really is the relationships and rebuilding those and seeing your friends. Or if you don't have a lot of ministry friends, to be able to come and say, look, I need to get to know some guys who are going to be praying for me, who are supportive of what I'm doing, who celebrate what I'm accomplishing for the kingdom of God. So great thoughts, Cody. What about you, Robby?
Oh, definitely the friendships. I remember the first Idea Day that I went to, you know, the thing ended on Tuesday evening, and I was out to eat with a group of friends that I made that day that I didn't even, I'd never met them. Some of them have come and preached for me now, and we've become great friends. And so the relationship aspect is huge. But I will speak to this about Idea Day, because here's what I really like. And I've got friends that are on both sides of the independent Baptist world. So I've got some that are dear friends that are, for a philosophical standpoint, would probably be more conservative in some areas than what I am. I've got some friends that are maybe to the left of where I am on stand of ministry. But here's the great thing. If you come to Idea Day, you're not going to deal with all that politics and all the junk that goes along with camps and networks. And you're going to find a group of people that truly want to enjoy the fellowship with brothers and sisters in Christ, that want to serve the Lord, that just want to get ideas. And you know what? Ideas that work in my church may not work in your church, and vice versa. But I came out with more ideas than I could possibly implement, and we have implemented a lot of those. And some of those were guys that were further to the right than me, and some of them further to the left than me.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day,
that's what shocks most people about how Idea Day works. A lot of people are always surprised by that. I'm learning stuff from people all over the spectrum.
And so I think it would be great, regardless of where you fall in ministry, because the music's not going to be an issue, and all these other things that are important in church culture to where we are, but they're not going to be brought up at Idea. And I think, Josh, I think you've done a wonderful thing by putting that together, because it's really one of the few places that I know of that stays out of the politics of ministry and just concentrates on giving things they can use.
Well, we're going to have a great time. I'm excited. Hey, Robby, by the way, if somebody has a church staff, they're thinking, I'm going to go, I'm not going to bring my staff. What would you say to that?
Oh, you got to bring your staff, because
there you go.
Yeah, seriously, they got to bring them. And here's why. You're going to come back fired up, ready to implement 100 things, and your staff just killed themselves doing everything that you didn't do that week. And so they're already not excited that you were out of town. Am I speaking truth, Josh?
Yeah. Oh, my word, yes.
Yes. And so they're not going to be able to experience the same excitement. But then, one of the big key meetings that I look back on for our team, our leadership team, happened around a table at a restaurant in Las Vegas several years ago at an Idea Day, and had nothing to do with Idea Day, but it was huge for our team. And I think is partly why we are where we are today because of that. You got to bring your team.
Amen.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys, for joining me. For those who are out there ready to revitalize or take that big leap into that church and to say, boy, there's a lot of problems I've got to deal with. Learn from these men. It's incredibly true. God is with you. You are enough. And what God is calling you to do, 20, 25 years from now, when you look back, you'll be thanking him that he gave you the boldness to step forward by faith and revitalize that work for the kingdom of God. Look forward to seeing you guys in January, and I'll let you go. Later.